The Jewel of Medina is a historical novel by Sherry Jones. It was scheduled for publication by Random House in 2008, but subsequently cancelled. It was subsequently announced that it would be published by Beaufort Books in the United States and by Gibson Square in the United Kingdom and the Commonwealth. Eventually it was published in the U.S.by Beaufort Books. The novel tells a fictionalized version of the life of Aisha, one of the wives of the Islamic prophet Muhammad, and the person who reportedly accompanied him as he received most of his revelations. The novel tells Aisha's story from the age of 6, when she was betrothed to Muhammad, to his death. Cancelled publication. In 2007, Random House bought the publication rights to The Jewel of Medina in a $100,000 two-book contract. The novel was scheduled to be published on August 12, 2008. The Book of the Month Club had agreed to feature the novel in its August 2008 issue, and Quality Paperback Book Club was due to follow suit in January 2009. The novel's original marketing blurb read, "Married at 9 to the much older Muhammad, Aisha uses her wits, her courage, and her sword to defend her first wife status even as Muhammad marries again and again, taking 12 wives and concubines in all." Denise Spellberg. According to an opinion article by Azra Nomani in the Wall Street Journal, the original publication plans began to unravel when Random House received an email from University of Texas professor of history and Middle Eastern Studies Denise Spellberg, which was critical of the book and suggested its publication may inspire violent reactions from some Muslims. Random House's publicity department had sent Spellberg galleys of the novel, hoping for publishable comments from her. Instead, she found the book a very ugly, stupid piece of work, and suggested that it may elicit violence akin to past controversies over the satanic verses and the Gillen's Post and Muhammad cartoons. Similarly, Jane Garrett, an editor at Random House's Northumberland, said in an email that Spellberg had told her by phone that she thought the novel should be withdrawn due to a very real possibility of major danger for the building and staff and widespread violence. Garrett also claimed Spellberg described the book as a declaration of war, explosive stuff, a national security issue. Shortly thereafter, Random House cancelled publication. Nomani also read that Shafet Amanullah, a guest lecturer in Spellberg's classes and the editor of AltMuslim.com, a popular Muslim website, sent emails to a listserv of Middle East and Islamic Studies graduate students about the book. Amanullah later stated he had received a frantic call from Spellberg, who was upset, telling him that the novel made fun of Muslims and their history, and asked him to warn Muslims about the book since she found it incredibly offensive. In the wake of Nomani's article, The Washington Post published an editorial criticizing Random House's decision to dump the book without waiting for an actual uproar in the Muslim world. The Pittsburgh Post-Gazette and the Las Vegas Review-Journal were also critical of Random House's decision to cancel the book's publication. Irshad Manji wrote in the Globe and Mail that preemptive censorship was offensive to Muslims, while poet and literary critic Adam Kirsch criticized Spellberg and Random House for depriving the Muslim reading public of the freedom to reimagine the religious tradition through the eyes of a novelist. University of Pennsylvania adjunct lecturer Carlin Romano, writing in the Chronicle of Higher Education, criticized Spellberg for her aggressive act in working to cancel publication, for effectually advocating censorship, and what she claimed were Spellberg's disingenuous attempts to deny that she had played an instrumental role in the Random House decision. decision. Spellberg subsequently wrote a letter to the Wall Street Journal contesting Nomani's characterization of her as the instigator of the book's cancellation. Spellberg stated that, "I felt it was my professional responsibility to counter this novel's fallacious representation of a very real woman's life." Quote, "However, she insisted that I do not espouse censorship of any kind, but I do value my right to critique those who abuse the past without regard for its richness or resonance in the present." Quote, she also stated that the author and the press brought me into a process, and I used my scholarly expertise to assess the novel. It was in that same professional capacity that I felt it my duty to warn the press of the novel's potential to provoke anger among some Muslims. Regarding her frantic phone call to Shafet Amanullah, Spellberg said she had only intended to call the book to his attention, and that he had apparently misunderstood her intentions. Spellberg also stated that since the story broke she has received hate mail and been roundly pilloried online, stating that, "They are calling me an opponent of free speech, saying I'm a supporter of Muslim extremists." Public statement from Random House. Random House released a public statement about the decision not to publish the book. Responses: Jones told Reuters, "I have deliberately and consciously written respectfully about Islam and Muhammad. I envisioned that my book would be a bridge builder." Quote, she wrote in a blog for The Washington Post that she was chagrined to realize the far-reaching ramifications of this historic decision to quash a work of art before it could even reach the public eye. Salman Rushdie, author of The Satanic Verses, criticized Random House for the decision, saying, "This is censorship by fear and it sets a very bad precedent indeed." Andrew Franklin, who worked for Penguin Books when they published The Satanic Verses and is now the publisher of Profile Books, described the decision as absolutely shocking and called the Random House editors such cowards. Jeffrey Robertson, who received terrorist threats for representing Rushdie, said that Random House should pay Jones substantial compensation and recommended that the book be placed on a website so everyone can read it. Writing in his blog for the New York Times, Stanley Fish disagreed with the characterization of the controversy as censorship, arguing that Random House is free to publish or decline to publish whatever it likes, and its decision to do either has nothing whatsoever to do with the Western tradition of free speech or any other high-sounding abstraction, doesn't rise to the level of constitutional or philosophical concern, and it is certainly not an episode in some showdown between Islam and the Western tradition of free speech. Formulations like that at once inflate a minor business decision and trivialize something too important and complex to be reduced to a high school civics lesson about the glories of the First Amendment. Fish argued that the term censorship should be restricted to cases in which a governmental body interferes with the expression of ideas. However, linguist Bill Poser, writing on the Language Log blog, disagreed with Fish's interpretation, arguing that the Enlightenment value of freedom of expression does not lead only to restrictions on the powers of government. It requires that all of us tolerate expression that we may find offensive. A free society cannot permit anyone, government, corporation, church, or individual, to decide what may and what may not be published. That a publisher should cancel publication of a novel out of fear of violence by religious fanatics has everything to do with the Western tradition of free speech. It is a disturbing reminder that this tradition is not universal and that it is at present subject to very real threats. Subsequent planned publication. On September 4, 2008, it was announced that British publisher Gibson Square would publish The Jewel of Medina in the United Kingdom and the Commonwealth. Gibson Square publisher Martin Reinier called for open access to literary works, regardless of fear, and said, "If a novel of quality and skill that casts light on a beautiful subject we know too little of in the West but have a genuine interest in, cannot be published here, it would truly mean that the clock has been turned back to the Dark Ages." Quote. In a press release, Reinier added, "I was bowled over by the novel and the moving love story and interesting but unknown history it portrays. I was struck by the research of Sherry Jones, who is a journalist with almost 30 years of experience, her literary imagination and passion for the novel's characters." Commenting on the decision by Gibson Square, Alvaro Vargas Llosa, a Latin American author, wrote in a widely published article for the New Republic, "The book's content, which has been described, promisingly, as being full of sex and violence, is irrelevant to the discussion. It may well be, as one scholar who read it contends, that the Jewel of Medina is pure trash." He closes his essay with, "I'm not interested in the reasons why Gibson Square has decided to publish the book, whether opportunism, greed, love of scandal, a dislike of the prophet, or a belief in the merits of the novel, but the fact that someone, somewhere, is willing to run the risk of not letting the threat of violence inhibit free expression is tremendously comforting." On September 27, 2008, Martin Reinier's house in London was firebombed, apparently by individuals opposed to the publication. 3 men were arrested on suspicion of commissioning, preparing or instigating acts of terrorism. Radical Islamic clerics such as Anjem Choudhury warned of further attacks. The 3 men were caught because officers had been watching them in an intelligence-led surveillance operation. They were later found guilty of conspiracy to recklessly damage property and endanger life. After the arson attempt, the publisher issued a statement saying that Jones had decided to indefinitely postpone publication of the book. Jones denies doing so, and says that the decision was entirely the publisher's. On September 5, 2008, it was announced that American publisher Beaufort Books would publish The Jewel of Medina in America. According to Jones' agent Natasha Kern, about a dozen other publishers had expressed interest in the novel, but some had backed off due to possible threats. Kern said that Beaufort was giving Jones a smaller advance than Random House had, but a higher rate of royalties. Beaufort's president, Eric Campman, said in a press release, "We are building a great team to bring the Jewel of Medina to the audience it deserves to have. Everyone at Beaufort is proud to be associated with this groundbreaking novel." International publication. The book was first officially published in Serbia in August 2008. After strong reactions from the Serbian Muslim community, Serbian publisher Beaufort Books withdrew it from stores, but after a few weeks, the publisher decided to return it to the stores, because of a large number of pirate copies of the book. In Serbia, the book was the #1 bestseller for at least 2 months. As of December 2008, the book had been published in 5 countries: the US, Germany, Denmark, Serbia, and Italy, with no repercussions. It will debut in Spain Feb. 4. Plans for publication are underway in other countries, including India, Hungary, Brazil, Russia, Republic of Macedonia, Finland, and Poland. There have also been negotiations with publishers in Sweden and the Netherlands. Reviews and critical responses. Jones provided the manuscript of The Jewel of Medina to Islamic website IslamOnline.net, where the novel was reviewed on August 18, 2008 by writer and poet Marwa El-Nagar. El-Nagar criticizes the book for its inaccurate portrayal of pre-Islamic Arab culture, and suggests that Jones was influenced by the idea of the exotic and mystical Orient. El-Nagar describes The Jewel of Medina as an attempt by a Western writer with little knowledge of Arabic, Arabia, Islam, and Muslims using her own Western, 21st-century values, ideals and emotions to portray an unrecognizable version of the well-known and well-documented story of Aisha. However, El-Nagar argues that despite the novel's inaccuracies, its faults, and its biases, its publication should not be stopped. On September 2, 2008, El-Nagar published Jones' response to her review to present as many sides of an issue as possible, and, for the sake of objectivity, approached the writer and invited her to an interview where she can express her own point of view and clarify many questions that were raised. Unfortunately, Jones said that her publishers have asked her not to speak before the book is published. Instead, Jones sent El-Nagar a column where she speaks about their Jewel of Medina and the motives behind writing it. However, Jones has promised El-Nagar an interview after the novel is published. On October 11, 2008, El-Nagar wrote a second look at Jewel of Medina. Indian Muslim writer Farzana Verzi criticized Jones' prose and perspective based on the published excerpts. It would be unfair to tar the whole book based on the prologue, but it gives a credible peek into the language and lack of nuance the author employs. Apparently, Ms. Jones, for all her 2 years of research, has managed a version of Chicklit, where Aisha gets in confessional mode and in a Mills and Boon fashion, leans on her husband, falls into his arms, and in a rather treacly account relates that the pain of consummation soon melted away. Muhammad was so gentle, I hardly felt the scorpion's sting. To be in his arms, skin to skin, was the bliss I had longed for all my life. At age 9 or 11, the all my life seems rather a stretch. Verzi also criticizes Azra Nomani's perspective that fictional accounts can humanize Islamic history. If people that believe in a certain faith, then let them decide on how to define the belief. The two constitutes freedom of speech. Fictional accounts of this nature only serve as trashy one-upmanship. They do not humanize or, alas, even demonize religion. Egyptian writer Ether El-Khatani reviewed the novel on October 6, 2008 in an article for Egypt Today entitled Flawed Jewel, and interviewed both Sherry Jones and Denise Spellberg. She critiqued the book and offered both Jones and Spellberg the opportunity to answer her critiques. El-Khatani also made a telephone interview with Jones publicly accessible. The transcript of the interview is available online. On October 7, 2008, El-Khatani wrote an op-ed entitled The Flawed Jewel of Medina, to which Jones responded to directly. On October 6, 2008, a Muslim organization run by British Islamist Anjem Choudhury and Omar Bakri Muhammad wrote an article on the novel, referring to it as a blasphemous book, and to Jones as an enemy of Islam and author of this heinous book, and her illicit portrayal of the marriage of Muhammad and Aisha. The organization states that The Jewel of Medina is a book that accurately reflects the current temperament of the disbelievers, and that it is yet another chapter in the continuing war against Islam and Muslims that reveals the burning hatred harbored in the hearts of the disbelievers. Jones responded to this article directly, stating that, I extend the hand of peace with a book that is respectful. Please do not judge my book by the slander being spread about it. I urge you to read The Jewel of Medina and see for yourselves that I am respectful toward Islam and your Prophet, just as I have publicly refused to judge all Muslims by the actions of a violent few. I ask you to judge me and my book by the actual contents of The Jewel of Medina. Already I have been criticized by non-Muslims as pandering to Muslims with my book because it portrays the Prophet Muhammad as a gentle, compassionate, wise leader and man respectful toward women and his wives. Several reviews have been posted already, including a review in Egypt Today, in which the author, a Muslim, says that I have written very favorably about the Prophet. You may not like my book or agree with it, but it does not insult Islam or Muhammad. The New York Times Book Review gave the novel a rather scathing review. They lean more towards the novel being historical fiction. Reviewer Lorraine Adams notes that an inexperienced and talented author has naively stepped into an intense and deeply sensitive intellectual argument, and that Jones' prose is lamentable. Sequel. According to the author, several sequels to the book are in the works. A German publisher will publish a sequel to the novel entitled Aisha, The Legacy of the Prophet, and Beaufort Books published the U.S. sequel, titled The Sword of Medina, October 15, 2009.